If you joined us last week, we started a new series, a Richmond series called Art. Maybe it's Art Talks. I don't know what you want to call it. But we covered an interesting artist, a British artist, John Constable, a part of the Romantic period. Really very much, and kind of I picked that person personally because it reminded me of some of the bicycle trips I've taken through the Cotswolds in the UK. The artist we're going to cover today is also of the same Romantic period, absolutely beautiful landscapes. Though temperamentally the exact opposite of John Constable. And the person we're going to be talking about today is John William Turner. He was you could see his passion in his art, almost violent brushstrokes, impatient, deliberate. A funny thing about him is he would go to art showings and exhibitions and actually, with paint and brush in hand, correct other artists' paintings without their permission. So you can that just tells you a little bit about this person. So let me hand it over to Sarah Kane.
Hi everyone. Hope you had a good week. So yes, as AJ mentioned, we are going to be talking about J.M.W. Turner, Joseph Mallord William Turner, or William Turner. He goes by many names. So he was born in 1775 in London to a barber. And there are stories that say it's likely that by the young age of 12, Turner's father was already selling his son's paintings to his clients. So he was like half barber, half art dealer. And he was at 12 years old, his paintings were already getting sold, which is amazing. And by 14, Turner enrolled at the Royal Academy Schools, which our friend from last week, John Constable, also studied there. And Turner began focusing on watercolor paintings, was kind of his focus. And Turner would travel around the country in his summers, sketching and gaining inspiration. So slightly different from John Constable last week, who took inspiration from his direct surroundings. Turner kind of had to go and seek it. And he got into this routine of, in his summers, he would travel around the UK and eventually other parts of Europe. And then in the winter, he would study and would be in his studio. And Turner was a notoriously kind of private person, so there's not a ton known about his personal life. However, we do know that he was a very determined painter and even sometimes competitive, and I love this story. So he's said to have drawn inspiration from some of the old masters from the 16th and 17th century, and even sought to recreate better versions of their paintings. He created two paintings in the early 19th century, very similar to those of Claude Lorraine, and he actually asked the National Gallery to hang them side by side. I just find that hilarious and like very competitive. So Turner painted, as I said, using watercolors. He also did some oil on canvas, but definitely more well-known for his watercolor paintings. And he's just known for using his playfulness with light and atmosphere and the power of nature and the universe. So let's take a look at some of his paintings. So this first one, this is titled View in the Avon Gorge. He painted it in 1791. And this is an oil on canvas work. He was actually visiting the Bristol area and found it to be easier to sketch paintings on the spot and then go and finish them in his studio. As I mentioned, he would sketch a lot while he was traveling in the summers, and then in the winters, go finish those paintings in his studio. And he would go on these trips during the summer and just come back with a full sketchbook. This painting is very topographic in style, meaning it depicts objects and the landscape in a really realistic fashion. So the shape, the scale, the color of everything is as it would be in real life. This painting got him the nickname, the Prince of Rocks, the Prince of the Rocks. And he really didn't want to be typecast as a topographer, as we can see in this next painting. So very different in mood and tone. This is called Fisherman at Sea, and it was done in 1796, so only about 5 years after. It's also oil on canvas. However, we can see that the style is so much less about objects being in their place and so much more about the playfulness with light. To me, this painting is so much more emotional. And, you know, obviously both paintings are absolutely beautiful, but this one to me is so much more interesting to look at. It's just got so much emotion behind it. You can see the turbulent sea and the dark clouds around it, but then the sun peeking out from the clouds and shining on the boat. Turner was really fascinated by the power of the sea. And as I mentioned before, just the power of nature and how that can act on humans. I mean, he actually depicted numerous paintings of ships at sea. And with that, I also want to show you one of his watercolors. So this is also a painting of a ship at sea. You can see, again, how drastically different it is from the first two. This one's called Burning Ship, and it was done in 1830, so a lot later in his career. And this is when he started getting in this style of these washes of color of watercolor. And this is kind of what Turner is more famous for. Again, we can see how he plays with light, but in this case, it's with fire instead of the sun peeking out from the clouds. And we can just see how abstract and blended the colors and the shapes are. So if we go back to that first painting I showed, it's very topographical. Everything is in its place. Everything looks very realistic. This is so, especially for the Romantic era, so abstract. And it's so interesting because each of the three paintings I showed could easily be from different artists. They're all so different in style and tone. I'm actually going to put a link. Let me copy and paste it, and I'll put it in the chat. It's a link to a collection of his works at the Tate. Here we go. There, I just put it in the chat. It's a link to his full collection of works at the Tate Britain. He was such a multifaceted artist. You could see, if you just scroll through when you have some time, you could see how his works were so different over the course of his career and how he really evolved as an artist. So the images I've shown are by no means comprehensive of Turner, but I hope this was a good introduction and an informative introduction into him, and I hope you look a little bit more into his other works.
Thank you, Sarah. That's fantastic. Do we have any questions from anyone? Any questions about Turner art?
Well, just one, AJ. So, Sarah, what was the how broad a scope in terms of painting? You mentioned, landscapes, and you mentioned, ships. Was there any other areas where Turner had, demonstrated a passion or, some sort of focus?
I would say the focus was, which also is in line with being a Romantic era artist, his focus on nature. So I think with that, ships on the sea and mountains and landscapes, nature was definitely more his focus. He was commissioned to do a lot of stuff throughout his career. He was, unlike some artists that get really famous and notable after they die, he was very well acclaimed and lauded throughout his entire career. So he was commissioned to do a lot of things. So I read that he was commissioned to do a lot of paintings of estates and castles, but I think his true passion was with nature.
Wow. Yeah, very, very different than last week's, than John
Right.
Constable, and quite a bit different than many other painters, I think, that we typically, as you browse through an art gallery or through a museum, right? It's
Right.
fascinating. Yeah.
I actually,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. I actually, I just realized this morning there was a biopic, a film done on him, on Turner, and I'll put the link to the movie trailer in the chat as well if you want to check it out. Kind of, you can see in the trailer just kind of the man that he was.
Okay. Fantastic. Not almost all artists have some interesting peculiarities about them, right? So not all the nicest of people.
Right.
I guess that's a lead in.
Hi, Sarah.
Yes.
Hi. Definitely got to follow up on those links. But just curious, did he grow up in the countryside? Is that where he gets his passion from?
He was born in London and died in London, so very much a London man.
But in the city, maybe?
In the city, but he definitely traveled extensively throughout the countryside.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. If any of you find yourself in London on vacation or on business, the Tate Art Gallery just has the most absolute incredible collection of Turner's. Turner, from what I understand, left almost all of his art to Great Britain. Is that right?
Yeah, it was originally the National Gallery, and he his one what's the word I'm looking for? His one condition was that he's going to leave all of his art to the country, but he wanted them to build his own gallery section in the National Gallery. And eventually the Tate did that, not the National Gallery, but they built him his own section.
Fantastic. As Holly pointed out in the chat, that there was no short of, he wasn't short of any ego. Would have made a great proposal manager probably at SMA.
Great.
All right. Hey, thank you. That was wonderful, Sarah. Really, we had a lot of fun with that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome to stay on for the rest of the hour.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Great.